to On My Way to Wealth, the podcast where busy Gen Xers can learn financial tips as they navigate life on their way to wealth. And now, please join your host, Luis Rosa.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of On My Way to Wealth. My name is Luis Rosa, and I'm your host. A lot of you out there listening are either in college yourselves, or some of your parents whose children will be entering college soon. And as such, you'll be in need of filling out what's called a free application for federal student aid, also known as the FAFSA. So I wanted to talk to you today about the preparation that you need to do in order to fill out this particular form. This is one of the things that when I was going to college was brand new to me. And it seemed like another language at the time. My parents were not in a position to help me because they didn't even know English. And I don't even know if it was available in Spanish at the time. And you had to have all these numbers, right, from your tax returns. And it was like filled out by hand back in those days. I'm dating myself there a little bit. So it was pretty complicated. Now it's a lot easier to do. There is integration with the IRS, so you can import basically some of the stuff from your tax returns that's needed. So, and it can also be done online, and it's a lot easier, right? But still, it can be somewhat intimidating because it's something that's new, right? So you're already dealing with children going away to college, et cetera. So it's a lot going on. So let me tell you a little bit about the FAFSA form. It stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. Before we even get into the process, I wanted to point out a lot of you that are listening, this is the same with a lot of my clients where they make too much money to qualify for quote unquote financial aid, right? So meaning they're not going to get any actual money that's offered, like free money because of their salary. However, it would be a mistake not to fill out the FAFSA form because there are certain things that you cannot get unless you do so. First of all, most colleges will require it because they use it as a basis, right, for having all your information gathered into this one form. And believe it or not, there are certain things like grants and scholarships that schools would not give out unless this particular form has been filled out. So even, once you see the word aid, you're like, oh, I'm not going to qualify, I make too much money. Don't let that deter you from filling out this form because very likely the school will require it. And it's also something that you need to have done in order to qualify for actual free money, like a scholarship or a grant. So you definitely still do want to fill out this FAFSA form. Second thing, student loans are a form of aid. So even though it's not free money, it's something you have to pay back, it's still considered aid. So you cannot get these federal loans unless you fill out this FAFSA form. So something else to keep in mind. So even if you think you make too much money and your children will not qualify for anything based on your income, you still want to fill out this FAFSA form for those reasons, right? You want to get student loans available, and you also want to get the accessibility to any scholarships or grants that the school might offer. So be sure to fill that out. So I wanted to explain the need for that without a doubt, even if you don't think you need it. Now, once you've determined, okay, I'm filling out this form, one thing you need to do immediately is get what's called an FSA ID. And I will put a link in the notes section so that you can go ahead and click on that link and be able to create your FSA ID. You're going to need two. The student will need an FSA ID, and the parent that's going to be signing this form will also need their own FSA ID. They're pretty easy to get. You can go online. I'll put the link in the resource area in the show notes. Once you go, basically you go to studentaid.gov. If you're listening and don't have a chance to go to the show notes, it's studentaid.gov/FSA ID. And you can get it there, but I'll put a link. So once you establish this ID for both the student and the parent, there's several things that you should gather in anticipation of filling out the form. The form has gotten a lot easier over the years to fill out, but you still need to gather quite a bit of information so that you're ready. Number one, you're going to need Social Security numbers for the parents and also the child or an alien registration number. You're going to need federal tax information or your tax returns. There is a way for you to link your, it's an IRS data retrieval tool basically, where you can kind of like import information from your tax return, but it's still good to have your tax returns handy and also your individual W-2s, especially in the case of couples, because the FAFSA form is going to ask for the adjusted gross income for the parents, but then it asks individually what each parent made as well, which you may not necessarily be able to import from the IRS because it's only importing the total. So you still want to have those W-2s that were used to prepare those tax returns handy so that you can give that individual information. You also want to have records of any untaxed income, and that is things like child support, any veteran benefits, things like that that aren't necessarily taxed. You still want to have that information handy. Another question that the form is going to ask is the amount of money that you have handy, like in cash, savings, checking account balances, etc. And it's also going to ask about investments other than your home in which you live. So make sure you have those statements ready as well for any other type of investments that you have. Now, the process could be overwhelming, right? Because it is a lot of information, but you can also log in and save the FAFSA. So don't feel like you need to necessarily just do it all in one shot. But I do want to make sure that you do keep in mind that there is a deadline for the FAFSA. Each state has their own deadline. And more importantly, each school is going to have their own deadline. So you want to make sure that you contact whichever schools you're thinking about, either go online or go to contact their student aid office, because you want to make sure that you file that FAFSA by the deadline, which might be sooner than the state's deadline. So keep in mind those two particular deadlines there. One question I often get is regarding dependency status. A lot of parents always wonder, like, hey, what if my kid was not claimed on my tax return? Would they then be considered independent and then be able to file their own FAFSA form without the parental information? So I'm going to put a link to the FAFSA website that directly addresses who's considered a dependent or independent student. Generally speaking, if your child isn't claiming your tax return, they may still be considered your dependent for student aid purposes because there's other criteria that has to be met. So just keep that in mind. It's not as simple as, oh, I'm just not going to claim them and they're not my dependent. There's a lot more complication than that. So I'm going to put a link so that you can read the questions and see if that student is considered dependent or not. And if they are, they will need to provide parental information as well, which is why the parent also has to get their own FSA ID so that you can log in and enter some information and import your data from the IRS if you can. Another thing to keep in mind is, this form is going to be used to also apply for student loans, right? So I just want to just throw out a little tip, a little, just warning of concern, because I've done this myself. This is one of the biggest mistakes I've done. If you've ever been to my website, you'll see it listed as one of the biggest money mistakes I've made, is don't borrow more money than you need. And, it sounds simple, but it's very easy sometimes in the process, because when you're filling out this FAFSA and then you're eligible for student loans, sometimes you have the ability to borrow more money than you need. It may happen, So what happens is the school gets the money that is required to pay for tuition and all that stuff. And then you get the difference sent to you to pay for other out-of-pocket expenses. So that opens the door for you to end up possibly getting more money than you actually needed, And so in my case, I remember I had no clue. I was just filling out this form. I ended up getting a check back, and it's like, woohoo. At the time, you're all happy, you're getting all this money. I'm a college student with no job. Went to Cancun for my first trip during spring break with my friends, but it took me a while to pay that back because that was part of a loan that eventually has to be paid back. So just be careful, because especially now you see a lot of kids graduate with a mortgage, basically, right? Because they have this huge student loan payment. So that can really deter you. So just be very aware of the fact that you could potentially end up getting more money than you need, which is why ideally, before you even get to this point where you're filling out a FAFSA, you've done a lot more planning in advance, which is why I highly recommend that you sit down with a financial planner that you can go over your plans as to where your children are expected to go to school so that you can anticipate the cost and you can then plan accordingly. How are you going to finance this? Should you open up a college 529 plan, for example? How much money should you put into this for how many years so that you have enough to pay for the school? Or if you're not going to have enough, what is option two? Are you going to do student loans, parent plus loans, things of that sort? So you don't want to go blindly into this. It's something that you ideally would have sat down with somebody, to say, when is the best time to plant a tree? It's 100 years ago was the best time to plant a tree. Now, when is the second time to plant a tree? That's today, right? So if you haven't done much planning, there's still some time, but you definitely want to get proactive with it, right? Don't let this just hit you in the face and you're just reacting to what happens, So you want to make sure that at least you know what you're getting into. All right, so back to the FAFSA. You got your FSA IDs, you have your personal information as far as your income, your assets, tax return stuff, and now you're ready to fill this thing out. So just want to let you know, not exactly how to fill this form out line by line, but just kind of like give you an idea of what to expect in terms of what happens after you fill this FAFSA out. So you fill out the FAFSA. Another thing, which I'm also going to put in the show notes, is you want to choose which schools you want to receive this information that you are including in this FAFSA. So what you want to do is find out the school code for that particular school so that you can list them. It's not a big deal if you don't have it. There is a search tool within the FAFSA if you're doing it online where you can find it. But if you can find them ahead of time, it'll just make it even that much easier for you to fill out the FAFSA. So I'll put the link in the show notes. You want to find the code that is assigned to that individual school so that they too get the information. So you can pick. I think when you're using the app, you could do up to like 10 schools, for example, and then you can just list them and put their codes in there so that they all get your information. Right now, once you submit it, hit the send button. You'll receive an email confirmation from FAFSA just saying that your information was received, it was processed. The colleges that you chose will then also get a copy of it, and some of them might reach out to you individually if they need more information. Now, if you are a first-time applicant, you're going to receive an aid offer at some point from each college, So again, aid is not just free money. It also includes student loans and or grants, scholarships, et cetera, right? So you will get a school aid package from all the schools that you included in the FAFSA. And hopefully you did more than one, right? Because you definitely want to increase your chances. And you also want to compare. Just like when you're shopping around, you can shop around, quote unquote, for a college. So when you get these different aid offers, you can then compare and see which school is actually giving you the most benefit. And that should be a big factor in making the decision as to where to go, right? So you definitely want to review and compare those offers and then decide which school is best for you and best suits your needs. Now, if you're a renewal applicant, so let's say you've already filled out the first FAFSA, now you're going into the second year or third year, et cetera. It's same concept. You're still going to receive an aid offer from the school that you're attending. And then you have to review it. And once you do review that, then you have to formally accept it, right? So, and each school will tell you exactly how to go about that. You might have to log into your portal and then hit accept so that they know that you've accepted their offer. So definitely want to review them first. And again, this is something that a financial planner can help you with, maybe help you make that decision with reviewing these offers so that you can just make an informed choice, right? One thing that I've been asked about too, especially now with coronavirus and the pandemic, a lot of people's situations have changed. I've known clients of mine who have gotten laid off, for example, lost their jobs, but the financial aid forms that they had filled out were based on when they were working and making money. And, it's very unfortunate. The financial aid form does not have an area to address these special circumstances. So you still got to fill it out and still use your tax information. And then what you want to do is you want to contact the individual school, the financial aid office, and then explain that you have a special circumstance like a job loss. So you might say, hey, listen, I was making X amount last year, but I lost my job. So I want to make you aware of that to see if there's anything else that I might qualify for that it's not reflected in the FAFSA application itself. So you want to make sure you contact the school directly in that regard. So there is a way, and each school is going to have their own different process, but there is a way for you to address the fact that your situation has changed. So you want to make sure that you bring that up because you might have not qualified with the income you made when you first applied, but maybe with the job loss or having income reduced, et cetera, that might make it where you do qualify. So let me just recap here very quickly. You want to make sure that you do fill out the FAFSA, even if you don't think you'll qualify for free money, because scholarships and student loans are still going to require that you fill out a FAFSA in order to qualify for those, right? So you want to make sure you fill that out. Get your FSA ID for both parent and student. If you have any questions about dependency, definitely check out the link that I'm going to provide so that you answer those questions for yourself and ahead of time. Also, be sure that you do not borrow more than you need. Very important. Don't make the mistake I did. Be aware of the deadlines, not just the state deadline, but also the school's deadline. And then, once you get those packages, make sure that you review those offers and you make an informed decision, right? And if you're not even at the point yet where you're filling out FAFSAs, you're far away from college, be sure to sit down with a financial planner, plan ahead, figure out what you need to do today in order to best prepare for when that day comes. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to send me an email at luis@onmywaytowealth.com if you have any questions. And check out my website, buildabetterfinancialfuture.com. As well, if you want to download the 3 money moves to make before turning 45, there is a download there as well. It's also in the show notes. So thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to On My Way to Wealth. If you have any questions, please send me an email at luis@onmywaytowealth.com. The information provided here is for information and education purposes only. The opinions expressed herein are solely those of myself, unless otherwise specifically cited. Material presented is believed to be from reliable sources, and no representations are made by my firm or myself about other parties' information or accuracy or completeness. All information or ideas provided should be discussed in detail with a financial advisor, accountant, or legal counsel prior to implementation. Thank you.